Bizarre scene in a Colorado courtroom today. James Holmes, the 24-year-old suspect, appearing in court just 4 days after he allegedly opened fire in a movie theater. The flame-red hair, the dazed look, and in the front row, parents and friends of the victims studying his face. The father-in-law of one of the victims said he looked demonic. ABC's David Muir has covered this story from the first bulletin, and he is outside that courtroom again for us tonight. David.
Diane, as you know, so many families here have told me they want to focus on the survivors, the victims here. But today a community did pause to stare down the alleged gunman face to face. The guards atop the courthouse as James Holmes was being walked through an underground tunnel to the courtroom. Also walking in the families of the victims, heads down, holding hands, a woman on crutches, a couple arm in arm. And this is what they saw. James Holmes, his hair still dyed that fiery comic book color. His eyes at times exaggerated, wide open, offering an almost stunned expression. Other times seeming to struggle to keep them open, to stay awake.
You have a right to be advised of the charges.
And almost immediately, questions from onlookers and viewers watching on television. Was the suspect on some sort of medication? Those moments when he went from one extreme to the other, his bulging eyes, and suddenly his head dropping. We asked former FBI profiler Brad Garrett to watch with us, to tell us what he was seeing.
He's not in this courtroom mentally. He's elsewhere. He's in some alternative reality that he's created. I also think there's a combination of the reality of what has happened to him has set in as to what it's done to himself as well as to the victims.
And immediately after James Holmes was in court, the prosecutor was also asked if he was on something.
We would have no information about that.
The other question she faced, will she pursue the death penalty? She said she will ask the victims' families first.
If the death penalty is sought, that's a very long process that impacts their lives for years.
David Sanchez said his daughter barely escaped the theater, her husband shot in the head, in a coma. This morning, his daughter asked him to go to court. And you felt your daughter needed you to come?
Yeah, she confirmed that this morning. When it's your own daughter, and she escaped, from death by just mere seconds, I would say. It really makes you angry.
What's the appropriate punishment for this guy?
Death.
They were not the only families watching. The suspect's family, through an attorney in California, reiterating that their hearts go out to the victims. That attorney saying this about James Holmes' parents, who watched their son go from this, that video obtained by ABC News when he was 18, to this.
I think everyone can imagine how they're feeling, anyone who's ever been a parent.
And as the courtroom scene unfolded today, across town, word of one family's blessing. You'll remember that mother and daughter both shot, her 6-year-old girl not surviving. Ashley Moser, it turns out, was pregnant when she was hit twice in the abdomen. Tonight, her family telling us that unborn baby survived. That family calling it a miracle tonight in a community that could sure use one, Diane.
I'll say, okay, thank you, David. And I want to bring in ABC's legal analyst, Dan Abrams. We studied this tape all day, watching that scene in the courtroom. Tell me about that red hair described with such terror by survivors. Whose decision would that have been to show up like that?
Certainly his. I mean, this is likely how he was arrested, what he looked like at the time. And remember, why would he
changed it, right?
He could have, but why would he want to? Remember, this is someone who was arrested at the scene, dressed up like the killer with the weapon. So you start to think that his most likely defense is some sort of mental defect defense. So why would you suddenly want to make him seem more sane? But with that said, I think his lawyers are probably just getting to know him now, and there was just no reason to make any change.
And the prosecutor refusing to comment on any medication. But would a prison give sedation to somebody showing up?
Very unlikely. Typically, a prison will only give someone a medication that they're already taking and they absolutely need, and they certainly wouldn't give him enough medication to make him look like that. So you really have a number of options here. He's either extremely tired, he's got some serious mental defect, or he's faking it. And that's really ultimately what a court and a jury may have to determine.
And the first big determination will be competency to stand trial. How soon will we know about that? We saw his lawyers go over to him. They had a apparent conversation with him.
Yeah, and they said that they had advised him of his rights. Remember, before we even talk about what kind of defense he's going to pursue, the first question is, does he understand the proceedings? Can they pursue this case against him? Is he competent to understand that? And that's a really low standard. The only question is, can you basically talk to your lawyers? Do you understand what's going on? And that'll be the first question, I think, when it comes to his mental state.